Most people, when they think of Seattle and wanting to live close to downtown, they think of a couple areas like Queen Anne, Capitol Hill. We're actually helping way more people settle into this area than we are in Capitol Hill because of the diversity of these neighborhoods.
There's so many different neighborhoods and there's so many different styles of life. You can have two completely polar opposite type of living experiences in a very small distance.
This is actually what Seattle is.
Madison Park is right on the water, very quiet.
The Central District is a blue-collar neighborhood. Madrona, I'm thinking of those old historic homes.
Madison Valley, it's young tech workers.
Best value for a first-time home buyer.
Central District.
Quietest neighborhood to live in.
Madison Park.
Most likely to appreciate fastest over the next 5 years.
Judkins.
Welcome to another episode of Seattle Living and Wealth Building. Wow, we're gonna have an amazing show today because we're gonna talk about these neighborhoods that often aren't talked about when you first think about moving to Seattle. Most people, when they think of Seattle and wanting to live close to downtown, they think of a couple areas like Queen Anne, they think of Capitol Hill, and Capitol Hill is just massive. So we're gonna talk about this eastern part of Seattle, which is between 405 and 520 and east of I-5, and why this area is incredibly important. We're actually helping way more people settle into this area than we are in Capitol Hill because of the diversity of these neighborhoods. They offer a lot more convenience and different feel from the Capitol Hill vibe that people initially aren't aware of when they think of Seattle. So we're gonna uncover 9 neighborhoods as we go through and discuss this entirely very important area. So we've got our usual suspects, Michael Dapper, Justin Day. The three of us as a Wagner Real Estate Group have helped tons of young couples, individuals, first-time home buyers, families settled into these areas, and they've all settled into different neighborhoods for very different reasons. And so that's really what we want to uncover for you guys as you're considering these neighborhoods and wanting to learn a lot more about them. So we're going to divide and conquer here. Justin's going to focus on some areas that almost might be considered a little bit yin and yang almost compared to what Michael is going to focus on. But at the same time, because of the way this whole area kind of intertwines with each other, there's a lot of overlap and crisscross. So first of all, Justin, tell me about what you kind of think of this area when people are, asking you, hey, I want to live in central Seattle. What does that mean to you and how do you describe it to them?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, when you look at a map of Seattle, right, you know where downtown Seattle is, and then that area to the east of Seattle, of downtown, there's so many different neighborhoods and there's so many different styles of life in there. And so, it's just like actually Capitol Hill in many respects. You can have two completely polar opposite type of living experiences in a very small distance. And, that entire central Seattle area, which, as Maynard said, starts kind of up at Montlake up in the north end, all the way down to Judkins Park and Leschi on the bottom end. Very different styles of living in a very, very close proximity to one another. And I really do feel like there's a style of living for everyone. It doesn't mean it's for everyone, but it could be for everyone, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what happens a lot of times when we're talking with people and when they're asking us to describe these areas. And we can describe them all we want, but until somebody gets in there and kind of gets a feel for each of the different areas, they don't really know what it's like. You can't put this into words, right? Although we're going to do our best in this episode, right? So why don't you talk about the areas that you're going to cover first?
Yeah, so Montlake is one that I'd mentioned. It's right on the north portion of the central Seattle area. Making your way a little bit further south, you get into Madison Valley. And a little bit further to the east, you go into Madison Park and Washington Park. And adjacent is Denny Lane as well. So they're all areas that are very, very uniquely set up geographically in that whole area. Really great areas, typically more affluent than other parts of the, central Seattle area. There's a private country club that's right in the middle of it all. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. And then Michael, what are you covering?
So I'm going to cover the neighborhoods of Madrona, Judkins, and Leschi. So these three are in
And Central District.
in Central District. I mean, the Central District is encompassing these, but
Yeah.
the CD, when we say CD in Seattle, we're talking something different. So, these three neighborhoods are they each have their own characteristics. But I think Justin's point is right, is that just like in Capitol Hill, where you've got North Capitol Hill and then Capitol Hill, all of a sudden, basically, if you run down Madison, which is going to go down to the water, everything to your right is going to start where Madrona is. But Madrona is much different than Leschi, and then Judkins, just the style of housing, the different industries that are around there. The types of buyers that are going to go to each one of those neighborhoods have different reasons, but you can get to them pretty quick. But they are distinct. When I think of this area, though, I really think of this is actually what Seattle is. People think of the Space Needle and think of just Queen Anne, and that view. But a lot of people that live in these areas end up staying there for life. I've got family members that live in the CD that they've always been in that house, or maybe they moved 2 blocks down. So there's a lot of old Seattleites, born and raised here that live down there. It's cool.
Yeah, and if you're watching this podcast online, hopefully you've overlaid a little map for you guys so you can get a better feel for the area. And I think that's why it's really important to cover all of this, because again, if you're new to the area, you're like, well, how do I decide even where to live, right? So we can start to talk more about what do these neighborhoods feel like? And while you're at it, Justin, weave in, what the real estate environment is like. Maybe who lives there? Is it kind of a action-oriented area? Why don't you go down and compare and contrast, and then we can hop into Michael as well too.
Sure. Yeah. So Montlake specifically, geographically, it's very close to the University of Washington. It's right everything really from the Montlake cut southwards, and so Montlake is a bit more of a sleeky vibe. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of restaurants and a very active kind of, main hub. But it is a very, very beautiful area, a lot of beautiful homes. Once again, an affluent area, really close in proximity to the University of Washington, the hospitals that are there, obviously very easy to get to downtown. So, I think it really has a large appeal to people who, value those things, right?
Well, Top Rank Elementary School, so it draws a lot of families, right? And that central part where it's easy to commute to the east side and also to downtown Seattle.
Well, speaking of elementary school, what's interesting is, Seattle Public Schools as a general statement doesn't necessarily have the highest rated schools. But in particular, when you're talking about central Seattle, Montlake and a little bit further south, Stevens Elementary are the two of the top rated schools in the entire city. So those happen to be, obviously Montlake and Stevens Elementary, which is further south of Madison, or of Montlake.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Yeah.
Describe what are the houses like? What's the price point? Is it single family? Is it condos, townhomes? Are people walking around everywhere?
Sure.
Yeah. Give us a vibe.
It's a lot of historic homes.
Yeah.
A lot of older homes. It's a very well-established community. A lot of walkability. The Arboretum is right there as well. So, if you really like to, the Arboretum, for those who don't know, is one of the most unique parks that you're ever going to see, right up against the water. Really close to obviously everything that's that northeast portion of the central Seattle has to offer. Homes in Montlake specifically, usually are starting in like the mid ones. You're not going to see much townhouse developments. You're going to see some custom homes that are going to go far beyond the $1.5 million range. But that's usually about where they start. So once again, it's an affluent area, not necessarily for what I'd refer to as for most first-time home buyers, but definitely an area where people, once they entrench themselves in that area, they tend to want to stay. So you don't see a ton of real estate selling in those areas.
Yeah, not a lot of turnover in Montlake for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So next, going a little bit further south, you can get into Madison Valley. And so Madison Valley is actually one of my favorite neighborhoods in the whole central Seattle area, just simply because it is very approachable from a price point perspective in comparison to a lot of the other parts of northeast central Seattle. A lot of townhouse development has happened over in that area over the years. And I think when you look at the types of people who are looking to buy in an area like Madison Valley, it's young tech workers, people who want to be close in proximity to a lot of what Capitol Hill has to offer. And then at the same time, it still doesn't have that crazy hustle and bustle that you have in, let's say, the Capitol Hill or other areas. So, yeah, it really has a really cool vibe. You're really close to, in proximity to the water as well. Just going straight down Madison from Madison Valley into Madison Park. So yeah, it really is a cool spot for a lot of different types of people. But I've actually sold several townhouses in there to younger tech workers.
Yeah. And comparatively, between Montlake and Madison Valley, it is walkable. There's lots of like restaurants, coffee shops.
Yeah.
You've also got big ball fields. So there's tons of families and single family houses as well. It is a melting pot of diversity as far as a residential neighborhood goes.
And once again, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Maynard, like the borders of these neighborhoods aren't well defined. Like maybe look on a map and it says this is what it looks like, and then you look at a different map and it shows it a little bit different, right?
Yeah,
and so that's where when you're talking about ball fields, I mean, I don't actually think of ball fields when I think of Madison Valley. I think of everything really from 23rd getting down a little bit down the hill, right? Getting towards Cafe Flora, which is...
Well, that's where ball fields are. So there's lots of big soccer fields and baseball fields right there at the corner.
They're not ones that
But that's a kind of the point, right? Yeah. I was just trying to explain the diversity of it all, right? Because there is a lot going on there.
For sure, right. You know, obviously, as you get a little bit further to the west, you get into Madison Park, which is a very, once again, affluent neighborhood. Very, I don't know if I'd call it exclusive, but there's just not a lot of real estate that sells in that area. Price points tend to be a little bit higher. You're not going to see a lot of townhouse development or development in any form. But, Michael and I were talking about this earlier, that one of the unique things about Madison Park is, it's right on the water. And so there's a ton of condos that have been developed over the years on the kind of the east face of Madison Park. And it really has become a very popular place for people to have waterfront condo living. In a very nice area. You get right down towards where the water is, and there's some really great restaurants there, a lot of walkability. It's very gradual hills. Just a very quiet community once you get into the residential portion of it. Really awesome. And then right beside that, kind of in between what we refer to as, Madison Valley and Madison Park on that north side, getting towards the Arboretum is where you get into like Broadmoor. I'm not going to refer to it as exclusive. That's very, very exclusive, right? It's a gated private community, private country club. There's about 300 homes in there. So it's
24-hour security.
Very much so, yeah. So it is definitely for people who are looking for that more upscale lifestyle. That's definitely a place that we'll want to consider.
Peek over the brick wall.
Yeah, right. And then for to sum it up, right? You've got Seattle Tennis Club. You've got Broadmoor Country Club. You've got private clubs there, right? And you've got lots of very expensive waterfront homes that are embedded into that community. And even a small, let's say, 1,500 square foot home can cost $2 million there because of the cost value of the land. So that's why we kind of lumped all these neighborhoods together, because it tends to be, if you're in this kind of 1.5 to 3.5 and up, right, you're more shopping in this more affluent area,
right?
If that's your vibe. Right.
Totally.
And then we have this other area, Michael, you can kind of jump into.
Well, I'll speak one other neighborhood, which is really Washington Park, which kind of, once again, blends seamlessly into Danny Blaine as well. And so, that's where you're starting to talk about some of the legacy properties. That's an
awesome neighborhood.
I mean, they're amazing, right? And so you're talking homes that are starting at $3 million and going well beyond that. Typically, they're estate-like properties. Some of them have phenomenal views of Lake Washington's East. But, there really isn't much. There's no restaurants or coffee shops in these neighborhoods. It's truly just established homes in these beautiful, beautiful areas. But they're still walkable to areas like Madison Park or Madison Valley and some of the restaurants that are accessible in those neighborhoods.
I always feel like Madison is a deceivingly long road, though. If you're at Washington Park and you're like, you just walk down the hill to the beach, it's 20 minutes.
It's not. Washington Park is a lot closer to kind of the restaurants of Madison Valley and then the edge of Madison Park at the Arboretum.
Fun fact, the Arboretum was designed by the same person or team that designed Central Park.
Yeah. So, very good. Good summary, Justin, right? That gives people kind of a lay of the land of this kind of northern part of central Seattle.
Right. Central Seattle.
Not Central District.
Not Central District,
Seattle.
Central Seattle.
Yeah. And then we can start kind of blending in south because you still get $2.5, $4, $5, $7 million homes that can now you start to blend into different price points in different neighborhoods, right?
Right. So the neighborhoods that I'm going to talk about are Madrona, Leschi, Judkins specifically, and then also this idea of the Central District. We're talking about Central Seattle as a big area. The Central District is more of a feel than I think a specific neighborhood. It's a collection of a couple different neighborhoods. But, from Madison Park, Justin was talking about the waterfront condos, right? If you go further north, across 520, then you're going to see homes on the edge of the water. After you go further south of Madison, though, you start to see homes, big, waterfront homes with docks and everything. Again, so like less condos when you're right on the edge of the water. But when, an average person that is not, looking to buy a $7 million waterfront home, if they're shopping in Madrona, the median price point there is going to be 1.2 for a single family home. That was a 24 stat. Where you go a little bit further south into Leschi, it goes up to 1.4. So little less density, bigger homes, probably a little less turnover in Leschi too.
And just greater diversity, right? So that's when we say average.
Right.
It's all about kind of the population. Yeah. It doesn't mean Leschi is a more expensive neighborhood than Madrona. Right. I think that's the important takeaway.
You can spend as much money as you want in Madrona too, right? But Madrona is an interesting area because if I'm leaving Capitol Hill, I'm headed east. I'm going down Madison, right? Madrona starts, and it's kind of like some older townhomes, kind of some new construction stuffed in with each other. It's there's a bunch of like convenience stores, kind of a junky Safeway. Sorry, Safeway.
That's kind of technically Madison Valley, right?
Yeah, but when you kind of go through that, and then all of a sudden Madrona, you see a lot of old, cool single family, usually pretty well maintained houses, and it totally feels like a kind of a residential neighborhood right next to the city, which is cool. Very walkable.
Yeah. This is great. Even for us, we're already starting to debate where lines. Well, you're not in Madrona. So we're trying not to be too technical here, but I think that just by doing so, actually it summarizes how all these neighborhoods can blend together. And from block to block, you're going to have a completely different vibe within really Madison Valley, within Madrona, within those areas. Super important.
Right. Madrona is probably the one area that has the biggest diversity between, the ultra high end and because there's some amazingly beautiful estate-like properties in Madrona. Yeah. But then you get a little bit further towards like 31st, and it's a totally different vibe, right? That houses, as Michael said, are much more modest and just totally different.
Right. Yeah. Good. Continue, Michael.
Yeah. So when I think of Madrona, I'm thinking of those old historic homes. A lot of them will have, some water views. It's definitely become, a neighborhood that I've seen be more and more desirable. I think people that, don't want to go move out to Shoreline, they still want to be near Seattle, but they've got some money. Maybe they have a family. Madrona's a great place. But when I'm thinking of Madrona, I'm not thinking of, kind of the transition part of it. So, when I have a client that talks about Madrona, that's kind of where I'm going to take them. I'm going to take them to the old historic homes. When you move down a little bit further south, then you get into Leschi. And Leschi is cool because there's a big, bike trail that goes through the whole thing. Big, beautiful homes that are right on the water. And then the hill that goes back up, west towards I-5 is pretty steep. So all of those hills on, and lots of windy roads, you can get totally twisted around in there. But it makes it a really cool neighborhood that I wouldn't say is super walkable. It's runnable if you want to jump up the trail. But you're not like walking to a restaurant from Leschi. Maybe there's two down there on the water, I think, a Blue Water Bistro or something. But It's not.
Daniel's broiler.
Yeah, there is a Daniel's down there.
Just depends again on where you are, right?
Yeah, depends where you are.
We're doing a good job of creating generalisms, but it also
Right.
just highlights the fact that
Right.
you're not going to have a very easy 34th Avenue
Unless you like
walk in
walking.
Madrona that has
Yeah.
quite a few restaurants and coffee
In
shops.
Madrona's more in a grid, right? Where Leschi is kind of more, have a windy, twisty neighborhood. But, and then you're also really close to Seward Park, which we're not talking about. Seward Park is a little too far south, but
Seward Park's way south.
You got to go through Mount Baker to Columbia City.
right. But if you're on the bike, you get whatever.
I get what you're saying. Yes, yeah.
But Leschi's got some, lots of homes that are built in like the 40s, 50s, 60s. The average home in Leschi, I think, is 2,300, 2,400 square feet. Where in Madrona, it's a little bit, less. It's about 2,100 square feet. Again, the price point difference is really probably the median is being changed because of the existence of all the waterfront homes that you're looking at $5, $6, $7 million sometimes. But it is a really great neighborhood, and it's pretty quick actually to get, in a car to Seattle. You just kind of go up the back spine of Seattle rather than going up through Capitol Hill. Judkins is going to be closer to the freeway. So now if I kind of turn around and I'm going towards, I'm now facing Seattle from the south. Judkins is right on the top of the hill there. So where the old historic building is that everybody thinks is like an insane asylum, you can look it up. It's not. Right there's Judkins Park, which, when I was growing up, Judkins Park wasn't really a place that you wanted to be after dark. There in the 90s, there was that neighborhood had some problems. Now, though, there's been a lot of investment. Seattle real estate has been getting more and more expensive. So some of these neighborhoods that have maybe been neglected are getting a little bit more love. So the light rail's going in there, which is going to be great. We've already seen a lot of townhomes being developed there in the last 15 years. And it's a great place to be, again, if you don't want to be in Capitol Hill, which is where a lot of people will start looking at a townhome and they go, I don't know, is it maybe a little
It's
much?
expensive. Yeah,
Very expensive.
Yeah, expensive and busy. Yeah.
And busy, maybe you go to Judkins and you can buy, the same townhome that would be 1.1 in Capitol Hill is maybe 900. I think the average price point for a single family home that probably includes townhomes is 800 in Judkins.
So that makes a lot of sense now. So light rail, up and coming,
Right.
Lots of development. Let's talk about the very important area in between Capitol Hill and Judkins, which we call the Central District.
Right.
So this massive redevelopment, a lot of change happening, but also a lot of history there too.
Right. So it's important the Central District is where historically since the 20s, it was an African American neighborhood or Black neighborhood, right? So it used to be like 65% African American. Now it's like 25%. The gentrification of it, there's progress there, but it's also, the gentrification can be problematic for a lot of different reasons, right? We won't get into that, but it's important to remember that, like the CD, you've got Garfield High School there. Garfield has, roots in music. So Garfield's won a ton of awards for the jazz band. Quincy Jones went there. Jimi Hendrix went there. So you've got, a lot of activism that came out of there through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And, really tight, strong community that has fought for the CD, for a long time.
Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones went there.
Yeah.
So,
Super cool, right? So continuing on, right? Just from a time standpoint, let's talk about what it looks like a little bit today. There's some diversity. It's changed a lot. Yeah.
It's changed a lot, but I would say the CD is still where you might see, a brand new townhome come up or, a set of 4 of them. And then next to it is an 1,100 square foot house that hasn't been painted in 40 years, with a chain link fence around it. And there's an old lady living there. A lot of the, businesses there are all, privately owned. So a lot of small shops, barbershops, small restaurants, not a lot of like fine dining, formal food. It's a blue collar neighborhood still. blue collar for having still, Seattle prices are expensive. You're not going to find a house there for 500,000. But the Central District is really important to Seattle for that reason. If you're going through it though, you don't really, you might look up a house and go see that house, and you look around and nothing else looks like that house, right? And I think that neighborhood is where, not even block to block, but on one street, you can see, the movement happening, right? So,
from a development perspective, I mean, the amount of development that's happened, especially around like on 23rd, and around Jackson. I mean, that whole area is 100% different than it was even 15 years ago.
Right.
I mean, there's big condo buildings and lots of cool development happening in there, and
COVID hit the
Mm-hmm.
CD kind of in a bad way, where the small, because they're privately owned businesses, a lot of those went out of business, and then with our homeless issues, kind of started to collect around these abandoned businesses, right? So we're recovering from that, but you can still see kind of the effects of that, especially on Jackson, is a perfect example. But then you go 2 blocks and it's all different.
See, that's a really good way to describe that area, because it couldn't be more diverse when it comes to, like, from a real estate standpoint and a business standpoint. You've got gentrification on the one hand, creating places like a nice, very uppity PCC market, right? Health and wellness, not the cheapest groceries, really cool restaurants. Yet you have like one of the restaurants of the year called Communion right there in the heart of the Central District, Black owned, has a lot of just phenomenal food, right? And you can go about a block and a half south. We can have a couple of our clients who are kind of new to the area and trying to figure out where to live. They love the diversity of that, but they also had a pretty high standard for a home. Right. So they ended up buying a $2.1 million kind of new construction remodel there. Not a remodel, but like a new construction home. And, the average price point on that block is probably about 1.2. Right. So they're kind of the standout property. So there's a lot of kind of diversity there. Yeah. So, that was a really good rundown, and we probably spent a lot of time on those different neighborhoods, because that is kind of the basis that allows us to build off of that. But I think there's, here's an interesting summary that we could go through to just quickly go for our audience. What are the different vibes like? You got Madison Park, lakeside, quiet, affluent, $2.5 to $6 million price range. You got Washington Park, private, stately, a lot of history there, $3 to $10 million price range, old money, prestige. You got Montlake, a lot of diversity with UW, just families there, commute to the east side or downtown, super easy, average price point like 1.5 to 2, right? And you got Madrona. Madrona has a wide range of diversity, but if you're talking about kind of the fancier drag on 34th, closer to the water, you're looking at $2+ million. Madison Valley, a lot of more diversity. You can get some townhomes, you get single family, easier to walk to, so close to Capitol Hill, a little bit more central, on the edge of Central District, very diverse, very, a lot of, that would be kind of the definition of gentrification and how things have changed. That part would probably be it. And then on the southern end, you've kind of got up and coming Judkins Park, which up and coming, I think my client probably bought the last townhome that is a new construction townhome at under $700,000 in that area right now, right? And he bought an awesome 2-bedroom, 2-bath, young tech worker, great spot for him, right? And their dog to walk right over that Judkins Park. And then you got Leschi, which is kind of like long established. You got a little bit of a marina there, right? So it shows you the diversity of those neighborhoods, as well as different price points. Good summary, guys. Good job.
I think when you see the gentrification where there's a part of the CD where there's a liquor store and a grocery outlet, and then you go 5 blocks down, and then it's a PCC, a Whole Foods, and like a coffee shop that sells $10 coffees. So it's like it switches quick.
Yeah. So now people got to eat somewhere, right? So why don't we talk about the food scene? And not every little neighborhood is known for having a little bit of a food scene, right? But if you're now, there's so many people who love food. They want to go to coffee shops. They either want to walk to it, or at least have it very accessible, right? What would you say are maybe some of the best neighborhoods for that? And give me some gems that you guys would recommend.
I mean, I would personally say Madrona or Madison Valley for sure, because you're quick to Capitol Hill if you want to go up there. But right down Madison, there's a ton of great restaurants down there, and a lot of different options as well. It's not just steakhouses. You can get in pretty much anything.
I think each individual neighborhood, other than Washington Park, Broadmoor obviously doesn't have anything. Montlake has a very, very small little hub. Where I think there's 2 restaurants there. But, other than those areas, they all have their own little uniqueness to them. And so an area like Madrona, yes, of course, it's a very unique, distinct neighborhood, but it's not a huge kind of downtown core where there's lots and lots of restaurants. There's some really cool places. There's a Molly Moo's ice cream. There's a classy baby shop there. There's some cool things to see, right? But saying that, if you're really looking for more diversity and a lot of cool restaurants, that's where a place like the Central District is awesome, because through the gentrification and how the neighborhood's changed so much, it's really given a lot of great opportunities and some really cool places. So that's kind of where I would really draw myself to. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to live in the Central District to be able to go to the Central District restaurants. You can live in any of the central Seattle area and be there within 10 minutes. So that's one of the great things about all these different neighborhoods we're talking about. They're all kind of surrounding that Central District, right? So everything that I was kind of talking about is on that northwest or northeast side of the Central Seattle. And then what you were talking about was kind of a little bit more east and south, right? And everything kind of is hubbed around that Central District area.
And we can't talk about food without the proximity to everything that's happening in Capitol Hill, right? That's the epicenter and the hub of everything. Right. But for me, as somebody who lives in Capitol Hill, North Capitol Hill, right? If I'm going to go to any of those neighborhoods for food, it actually will be the Central District. I'll go to Communion. Phenomenal. I'll go to Reckless Noodle. This is how big the Central District. Communion is almost on the edge of Capitol Hill, right? And then you've got Reckless Noodle, which is almost on the edge of Leschi and Judkins area. That's how kind of big that Central District is. So those are a couple of my favorites.
There's a chicken and waffles place.
There's a Fats Chicken and Waffles right in the middle of the Central District. Yeah. I think at 23rd and Cherry.
You get chicken and waffles, and then there's an Ethiopian place. For people that are into food and want to try different cuisines, the CD would have, if you want to try, a very specific area from, around the world, there's probably a restaurant there that represents that food. You know what I mean? If you want to try Pakistani food, they've got a restaurant there that's freaking awesome, right? People don't know what that is, and I didn't know what it was, but I went in and tried it. It was awesome. You know what I mean? So it's a cool way to kind of explore, learn about different cultures.
Yeah. So for all you folks out there, you can Yelp this or Google review this, but there's a lot of good different food options. What about walkability, though? Let's talk about what are your neighborhoods? Because a lot of our clients say, "Hey, I want to be able to walk to my coffee shop, or I want to be able to walk to my grocery store." So, which neighborhoods would count for that?
I think.
And then, what does that mean?
So it's funny because Seattle's very well known for its hills, right? So that's obviously one of the factors that goes into why someone's not going to want to live in one area versus the other from a walkability perspective. Michael mentioned Leschi earlier. It is very steep through a good portion of that eastern face. Madison Valley is quite steep as well, kind of going off of 23rd down the hill. But at the same time, Madison Valley happens to be one of those areas that there's tons of people out walking, and it's very close in proximity to that little hub off of Madison and kind of where ML King Way is. So there's a ton of walkability, I find, in any of the areas where there's a little hub. So people love going down to Madison Park and walking along on the water, the small park there, and getting to the beach. The Arboretum. The Arboretum is, other than Green Lake, probably the most walked place in all of Seattle, I would assume. Super, super desirable from a walkability perspective. You're not going to see people necessarily walking around areas like the Central District necessarily, because it's a bit more of an urban environment. That doesn't mean you can't walk around there, but
Well, you got a PCC, you got restaurants, you got breweries. So it's a different kind of
It's
walking is
different
kind
kind
of
of
what
walking.
you're referring to.
Yeah.
I know, just to be clear, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to see people walk there.
But I guess they don't just open the door, get in the car, like
totally different styles of walking, right? People walk for exercise, and you're not going to see them do that.
You're going
as much as
you're going for a purpose. Like you're not going through a park or that you're walking to a place. However, if you do live in the CD, if you have, I like this grocery store, I like this coffee shop, they're all pretty close together, But you're going to meet a hill when you go east-west. You can't live there and just expect to walk north-south and stay flat.
Nope.
Yeah, I've got a client who's asking me, like, one of his priorities about moving here to Seattle is like he's a runner. So he wants to be within 10 minutes of trails. He's like, is that possible pretty much anywhere? It pretty much is almost possible anywhere, especially if you're a runner. It's not going to take you if you run 10 minutes, you go 1 mile east, west, or north, you can be anywhere. And so, we can kind of like move into green space because we've talked about the Arboretum.
Yeah.
I mean, the Arboretum has just got to be one of the coolest like green spaces that we have. It is nature at its finest, right? With meadows, walking trails. The thing about this area, there's not a lot of like areas where you can just go like put yourself into like a parking lot, and next thing you know, you're in the Arboretum, right? There's so many different entry points for the Arboretum, except for the side that's bordered by the country club. They don't let people through the country club. You can't look at the Arboretum, but that is phenomenal there. And then waterfront. This is where, Michael, you were referring to. You could run along Lake Washington or bike along Lake Washington.
Yeah.
You could go all the way down Seward Park on the waterfront, and like you feel like you're not even near Seattle because you're on the downside of an east sloping hill, right? And you can't even see downtown Seattle. If anything, you're looking over at Bellevue.
Right.
So this is the other part about why this area is so important, is that if you work downtown Seattle, you can be in your neighborhood, within 15 minutes or so by bike or bus or, car. And then, or if you live on the east side, you can commute to almost any of these neighborhoods, pretty much, right? With easy access, either 520 or I-90. So if you're working at Microsoft, if you're working at Meta on the east side, if you're working at Google, all of those places are super easily accessible to you. So you have accessibility from a work standpoint. You've got trails and waterfront from a green space standpoint, and then you got all this massive, incredible options for food that you can't have anywhere. Right.
Yeah.
That's what makes this area so incredible. It's an unbelievable melting pot.
Your point about the commute though is great because I picture you're at the edge of Leschi to get to the middle of downtown Seattle in the morning. It's going to be way quicker. You probably don't even need to hit the freeway. And if you're that same distance, living north of it. Right, so
100%.
You come up the backside, but it's very peaceful in there, and it's important. Lots of history there.
We might as well just jump into the commute a little bit, right? Transportation. Because, the truth is, like, Seattle, one of the biggest things about Seattle is we've got traffic problems in a lot of it, right? And so that's where, you get into parts of the central district. Once again, I've been talking about kind of on the north side, you've been talking about the south side, but the great thing is you're close in proximity to two bridges that go across the east side. And so east side living is much more expensive than Seattle side living. And that's one of the things that's going to be so important for Seattle is to have that light rail connection that goes across the water to, all the way to Redmond. And so specifically Judkins Park has a station right there. It's the closest station to the water, going to the east. And that's going to be opening up in, if I'm not mistaken, the next 6 months or so. It's going to be really, really awesome to have that done. And that's part of the reason why that area has been such a huge place for redevelopment. A lot of townhouses, tech workers that are wanting to live there because it has easy proximity to downtown Seattle, but at the same time, super easy to get everything you need on the east side.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be a game changer because not only does it get you east, if you live in Judkins Park, you can now live in Columbia City, Seward Park, or in Beacon Hill. You can go up to, I don't know, maybe the stadium, light rail drop off, and then go east. And next thing you know, you're at Judkins.
Yeah, I don't know
so you don't even need to drive, right?
Right.
You can get all the way to Microsoft Redmond campus and just stay on the light rail and have, I don't know, I'm just going to guess, a 35-minute commute without traffic.
Right.
All the way from Columbia City.
Right.
Where you would normally have to like go through traffic and, you know, deal with all that mess.
It's a total game changer.
Yeah.
And I think for people that don't, you know, have never been here, like, why wouldn't they just live on the east side if they work on the east side, even if they could afford it? There's, you know, one, the price point is much, much higher on average, but also culturally, it's just very different. The east side is very different. Mm-hmm. And I lived in Seattle for a long time. Now I live on the east side.
Yeah.
It is very different. But there's a lot of people that go, man, I really like the feel of Seattle. I want the diversity. I want the culture. You know, I want the historic, you know, elements of Seattle. I don't want to live on the east side, but they work over there. It's really not going to be that big of an issue anymore, you know, with the light rail. And I think a lot of folks too, you know, they actually don't want to drive. So,
yeah. Well, and speaking of that, I mean, you know, public transportation is not exactly the easiest within the central, like the whole central Seattle area. Really, there's only two areas that I can think of that would be really beneficial for public transportation. One is Madison Valley, because there's a bunch of buses that go up and down Madison.
Right.
It's a huge point, a selling point for that area. And then the other, obviously, going to be Judkins with the light rail station. Yeah. The rest of it, you really kind of need a car for commute.
Well, 23rd goes major north-south.
Correct.
All the way up to University of Washington, one of the biggest employment centers in all of Seattle. But
But there's two buses that go through Leschi.
But Leschi, you're not going to have a lot of buses going through Leschi.
Madrona, you're not.
Yeah.
It's like,
you know, and we're talking public transportation, right? Which is obviously a big value add. And we mentioned it lightly earlier. There's, like, many people are car commuters, right? And the ability to access either 520 or I-90 from either of those areas, or Interstate 5 if you're going to, you know, the airport for work, or just heading easily downtown Seattle, right? That's those buses that you're talking about, Katie. And I'm not a biker. None of us are bikers, but my goodness, this is a biking mecca for getting to work and just recreational biking. Like, the city is just putting in bike paths everywhere. So that's not going to change, and it's just going to continue to develop, right? Yeah. So that's really cool.
Less parking, more bike paths, you know, light rail. I think, you know, Seattle is either a big little city or a little big city, but that's the growing pains of, you know, just kind of Seattle wasn't planned to be this big. So now, you know, we're putting in these systems that can be kind of a pain with a lot of construction, but it's definitely adding value for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what happens when a city grows. Develops before we know it's going to get as big as it gets. Then you have to bolt on, you know, new transportation options. Okay, well, let's continue, right? We've done, I think, a really good job of summarizing the different vibes of the neighborhoods, what they're like, who might be drawn to the different areas, food options, transportation options, all the great green spaces that we have. Let's talk about the future. Where do you see, what big changes do you see here in the future? We've already talked about light rail, but is there anything else for people to be aware of? You know, if you're going to buy in this area, why would you buy, and maybe why wouldn't you buy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes a lot of these neighborhoods very appealing is the fact that there isn't going to be a significant amount of change in areas like Madison Park and Washington Park. And, you know, Montlake is actually one area which is changing a lot with the fact that 520 has been completely redone. They're actually building the Montlake lid and about to open that, where effectively it's going to combine or reconnect the north part of Montlake, which is everything from the Cut down to 520, which it's not a huge community, but that has been, it's Montlake, but it hasn't been connected to like the main portion of Montlake ever, really since 520 opened. So it's really going to make it awesome. There's going to be lots of parks and whatnot to be able to easily access.
You mean connected
sides.
From a walkability standpoint? Because of the lid, not necessarily because of cars.
Not cars, no. It's just, I mean, you know, with the car,
walking,
even with the car, it was a pain to go over the bridge, and the bridge would go up. So now it's
well, the bridge will still be there.
Tough light.
the bridge will still be there. It's not changing. But the point is, if you live in the south part of Montlake, you could walk to Husky Stadium now without having to worry about the bridge or all the different traffic. So
I just want to stay in Washington Park.
That's certainly something that's going to change that dynamic. But when you look at property or areas like Madison Park and Washington Park, I mean, those are truly like established legacy type properties. Like you'll see obviously places go for sale, but you're not going to see much in terms of change in development in those areas. So it really is nice to know that they're established. But you go into areas like the Central District, I mean, it's going to continue to change and morph, and lots of new restaurants. And we're talking about light rail, right? But the amount of retail opportunity that there is around Judkins and that light rail station is very, very high. Yeah. And I really do see that long term as such a huge desirable area, especially for tech workers. Because that's one of the things that we talk to people about all the time is, okay, well, yeah, you work for Google in downtown Seattle, but guess what? You might get transferred to the Kirkland office and you have to go to Kirkland every day. Well, how do you do that? I mean, how do you buy something in Seattle when you're actually living in Kirkland or working in Kirkland? So, or let's say, whatever.
You sell your home with us, and then you buy a new home in Kirkland.
And that's not reasonable.
Light rail might not happen, so we got to make it.
But the truth is, an area like Judkins or anywhere that is off of the light rail is going to make it so much easier to be able to get from east to west or west to east. So I really see that as a huge developing area.
If you bought in Judkins 2 years ago, it's
or now,
right now,
right?
Or today.
It's been pretty relatively depressed here for a while. We haven't seen massive price appreciation, right? So if you're truly betting on the impact of light rail, that would be a good.
Which we have seen some proof of that too. Right. Like when you saw, the Northgate Station, Angel Lake Station around Seaside, all of those neighborhoods. As soon as the light rail came in, more, property values went up, more industry went in.
Okay. Well, we're not done yet. So get ready. Pick out your favorite neighborhoods, or not your favorite neighborhoods, but your neighborhoods that would be more appropriate for this closing rapid fire. All right?
Okay.
Yeah, and you can't belabor on this. You got to be quick, and you can give maybe one reason why. Okay? Best value for a first-time home buyer. Somebody.
Central District.
I would say, I'd say Central District.
Okay. All right. Forget the light rail that we get spent all kinds of time talking about. This is great. That's fair. Quietest neighborhood to live in.
Madison Park.
Madison Park.
Yeah. Most likely to appreciate fastest over the next 5 years.
Judkins.
I'm going to say Judkins or Central.
Or Madrona, actually.
Yeah.
I think Madrona, has got a good, it's on a run.
Best for young families with kids.
Ooh, that's a tricky one.
I'd say Madrona.
Madrona's got to be up there. I think Montlake.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Montlake too. Best views.
You got to say Leschi.
Okay. If you couldn't live where you are now, which neighborhood would you live in and why?
Broadmoor.
Washington Park that's the dream.
Yeah, I think.
But I'd want to be 20 years older because when I walk through there, I feel like I'm, trick-or-treating or something. But yeah.
I mean, obviously price point is a huge part to do with it, but Madison Park for me is it's such a cool vibe in there. I love
I also like Leschi because I like the space. I like the lots are big. It's not you're not jammed up. So I've always liked Leschi.
All right, there you go.
What about you? What neighborhood?
Northeast Capitol Hill. I live in North Capitol Hill currently, so I'm going to live in Northeast Capitol Hill. A lot of great options, a lot of great neighborhoods.
Totally.
So, all right. Well, that was a lot. That was a meaty episode. Hopefully you got some good value out of it, audience. I mean, that gave you probably one of our longer ones, but you can't go too surface on it, right? So hopefully we gave you some good insights that will make you consider these neighborhoods more or not, right?
And guess what? I think more importantly, we're just scratching the surface here. If you have questions about the neighborhoods, let us know. We can help kind of walk you through it and give you some more insights.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys found any value at all, please give us a like and a follow. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.